All right. Well, hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. Welcome to Third Thursdays. I am Michael Chauvin-Dalton, the director of the JKC Gallery. Behind me is remnants of a show that will be coming down soon. It was a show for undergraduate and graduate students who had graduated in the last 2 years, just to give them a little something that they may have missed these last 2 years. But the next show, co-curated by Ryan Casey and I, will be called The Road Home, and it'll be work by artists who have experienced some form of displacement, whether physically, socially, psychologically, and that the reception for that show will be on March 2nd. And we'll be doing a fundraiser with the sale of those prints to a few organizations that we'll be announcing soon. But tonight we are here with, of course, Heather and Habib, Heather Palasek and Habib Suab, and I'm going to change cameras and turn it over to them. Here we go.
There we go.
Hello, hello, hello. I want to welcome everyone to the Third Thursday. Snap it up, snap it up. To all the Zoom viewers and everyone that we actually have here tonight, I want to thank you. And what we usually do is every third Thursday of the month, we have two extraordinary photographers that come and show what they do, their body of work, and what it means to photograph photos. All right, without any further ado, I'm going to throw it up to Heather.
Yeah, you forgot to mention, this is our second anniversary. We've been doing this for 2 years today. Yeah.
Last year was March, no?
No, 2 years.
Oh man, yeah.
So thank you to those of you that have been with us for all of the 2 years. It's been lovely. We've built a really nice community, and we're excited to share with you. Next to us, we have local photographer CA Shofed, and joining us on Zoom all the way from Switzerland. So it's actually tomorrow there. We have Clinton Thornton-Casanova. I don't know if you, yeah, there he goes. He's waving. So these two artists are an interesting pairing because they both photograph our world, but totally differently. Our friend CA Shofed here photographs at least all of us in person that know him. We're friends with him. Some very known places to us, some local architecture, and then Clinton is photographing the cosmos. So we have very local to our hearts and very far away images to look at tonight. Two totally different processes, working with film, working digitally. So there's going to be a lot of good stuff to see tonight. We're excited to hear from both of them. Clinton is going to do our first presentation, followed by CA Shofed next to me, and we'll do Q&A at the end. But please know that at home, type away in that chat box. You can leave comments on the images, ask questions, and Michael will field the questions at the end. So Clinton, whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and share your screen and get us started.
So, hello everyone. My name is Clinton Thornton-Casanova, and my work consists of astrophotography and film, and I just want to explain how I got to where I am now and what keeps me going. The first thing is I grew up in Hampton, Virginia, and I have some people online here that are actually from there watching in, so thank you very much for coming in. I went to university in New York at LaGuardia Community College. I live now in Switzerland, but I moved here from Hawaii. I lived in Hawaii for 10 years before I moved here. I've always been interested in the night sky. Okay, there I am. I've always been interested in the night sky. It's something that I share with my fathers, older brothers, and grandparents and grandfathers before they passed. We would talk about old stories in Kemet or Egypt. And when my son became of age to actually understand the night sky, we decided that, okay, it would be enjoyable for him to have a visual aid. So I saved up my money and we bought our first telescope. And during my research with that telescope and looking for a telescope, I discovered astrophotography, and I became immediately fascinated with it. I talked about it so much, my wife actually purchased my first camera for me. And it's actually still the camera that I use today for pretty much all of my digital work. Um, it's also, I use it for astrophotography, and I'm able to connect it to the back of my telescope, as you can see back here, and I'm able to take pictures of the night sky. And the first telescope that I bought was a Schmidt Cassery telescope, and this telescope was perfect. It was a big light bucket. You could collect a lot of light, and you could look through just like a regular telescope, and that became extremely fascinating. It also had a feature on it called a go-to system. So you would point 3 stars in the sky, and the actual telescope would follow and know where it was in the night sky. And that was very helpful. It saved a lot of time from manually moving over. It was all electronic. It had a hand controller. And the first thing that you actually want to do when you have a telescope and now you have a camera, you want to hook it together and take pictures of the universe. So the closest thing, even tonight, there's a full moon. So if you go outside and look up, you're going to see a full moon. You probably won't see many stars out, because when the moon is out, it's extremely bright and it kind of hides the stars, especially if it's a full moon. So I began to take pictures of the moon, and I said, okay, now I want to take pictures like those pictures that I've seen on astronomy pods and other different websites that I was looking at for my research. So I actually took a picture of an eclipse, and this is the picture of the eclipse, and that really got me excited. Like, I really want to take pictures of the night sky. But I soon became to notice that the pictures that I want to take, I don't have the right equipment. So my father-in-law, he took me up to Batis, which is in the mountains in Switzerland. It's very high up in the mountains. And as you can see here, the valley is just down below. And he took me up to Batis, and we set up my telescope, and the longest exposure I could do was about 6 seconds. Now, 6 seconds with the f10 aperture is not a lot, no matter how high you crank up your ISO. But I was able to get just a little bit of a taste, and for me, that was enough. I was already hooked, but I knew I would have to eventually sell that telescope in order to get the equipment that I would need in order to take the exposures and the type of pictures that I wanted to take and where I wanted my work to go. And it was amazing because I could share this with my son. So these are the Swiss mountains. They're very, very high up. I can't even explain it to you in miles, but it's very high. So this is the telescope that I saved up for, and that I use now. It took me quite a while to really understand it, and at times I would get extremely frustrated with it, but it has 3 telescopes on it. So it has the small one here, the big one, and then there's another small telescope. And how the process works is you have to find the North Star in order to get a polar alignment. And for about 3 months, this just drove me absolutely bonkers. And I became extremely frustrated with it. And I said, okay, right now this is not the thing for me. So I put it away for a while, and it stayed in my garage for about a year. But my father-in-law, he really saw that I was interested in photography, and so he gave me his film camera, and that's what started me into film photography. He gave me his film camera, but the camera body itself was broken, and I took it to a camera shop here in Switzerland, and I showed it to the guys, and they said, these were the guys at Orange Imago camera shop, and they said, hey, look, you can I can fix it, but it's cheaper for you to buy another body. So that's what I did. I bought another body, and then I really started taking pictures, and I had my films, and I went back to the shop and I said, hey, go ahead and develop these. And they told me, yeah, you're going to get them back in about 3 weeks. And I said, I want to see them now. Like, and they said, no, well, what you could do is you could develop it yourself. So immediately I started developing my own films. And next thing you know, the light leak that I had in the camera, I fixed that. And then I really got into film photography, and I kind of put the astrophotography on hold for a bit. And then I discovered medium format cameras, and I said, okay, I have to have one of those. So, but you know, you get one medium format camera, and then you have one format 6x6. Then I said, okay, I like the big negatives now. So I got another camera, which was a 6x9. I said, oh, this is very nice. And then I had a Mamiya RB67. And at this point, my wife is just looking at me like, okay, your cameras are getting a little bit too out there. But at a certain point, I discovered that I could actually set these cameras up with a flash, and I fell in love with being the control and able to use flash even with an old camera like this, because I just didn't think it was possible. And I just didn't know much about photography, but this journey kind of really helped me to understand about photography. So then the last film camera that I bought was a Canon EOS, because I said, hey, I have a Canon lens. I didn't think twice that I could actually hook it up to my telescope. So I actually hooked it up to my telescope. I was able to make focus with the digital camera and then just do a body switch. And I said, okay, well, now I can probably start getting back into astrophotography because I can connect everything that I'm learning now. And then I met reciprocity failure. If anybody's ever shot film, you understand after a few seconds, the time goes very, very slow, and you need a lot more time. So for what I would get in a 3-minute shot on a digital camera, it would take me 20 minutes to an hour, depending on the aperture in which I'm using. So this was one of my digital, this is M42. This is the target that I had been wanting ever since I started astrophotography. And I always love whenever the winter comes around, because these stars, they're in the night sky at a certain season. So during the winter, this is what you see. This is the star that's under Orion's belt, and it's very easy to find. You can even find it with a pair of binoculars, or even with your naked eye. So I started taking pictures of this with my new setup, and the more I got used to it, the more comfortable I became with it, and finding the North Star, doing my polar alignment, and then I started taking longer photos. And how I was able to use these photos, I would have to put it in a stacking software, and that software puts each photo on top of each other. And that gives me a better signal to noise ratio, because when you take one shot, if you look in real close, it's really noisy. It's like, it's horrible. But you add on 10 or 15 different pictures on it, and then you have a stacked photo, and that cleans up a lot of the noise. And this is Andromeda Galaxy, and Andromeda Galaxy is another target that was my favorite that I always wanted to shoot as well. And this became, at this point now, almost an obsession, because I said, okay, I have to get this equipment, that equipment, and I was dealing with the weather, and the colder it is, the faster your battery runs out. So at this point, I said, okay, now I have to start building up on it. And at first I was using a laptop in order to connect to my telescope. But at this point, the laptop that I had was very sketchy, wasn't really connecting all the way. It was just left me with a bunch of insecurities. So I kind of put that away for a while and set again for another, I'd say probably another 6 months. but I always went back and tried something every time that I had an opportunity to. So every time, this is M33 and this is the second attempt. So every time I could see myself progressing and getting better and better. And then this was Leo's Triplet. And I took this at a dark site, and the darker it is, the better it is for your camera, because you have less light pollution from a city or from wherever you are. So we are all made out of stardust. Like, sorry. We're all made out of stardust. So when I was taking these pictures of nebulas, I figured out what a nebula really is. A nebula is a womb, and it's a birthing womb for stars. And that's what makes stars, is nebulas. So my wife, she was pregnant, and I said, okay, now I really want to document her pregnancy. So during the course of her pregnancy, I used digital, I used film, and then I was able to connect those lights that I bought to the film camera. So then that became just my go-to. I just would use the digital camera almost as a digital Polaroid to check my exposures and everything like that. And I started just making a journey of her pregnancy. And when my daughter was born, I took my cameras, all of my cameras, every last one of them almost, into the delivery room. It's quite funny, but this was shot on digital just so I could check my exposure. Once I had my exposure, I quickly changed over to my film camera. And this was when my daughter was born. And of course, when you get into photography, the closest people to you are the ones that you're going to photograph. So I photographed my family a lot in the beginning. Every time, it got to a point where enough is enough, but this is my son and my daughter as well. And my son, whenever we go on vacation, I would have my cameras with me. I would always take some type of different films, and then I could experiment with different films. And Portraiture was a staple in my bag at one point. And then also slide film. And once I saw slide film and saw what it did, I really, really liked slide film as well. This is a glacier. This was shot on my 6x9. And I actually walked through this glacier with my family from Switzerland. And these are some of the shots that are from inside the glacier. And I knew at one point I would want to print these, but I wanted to just save up until I had enough photos in order to just print all at once. And that's kind of the process where I'm into now. And this is a walkway, this is into the glacier, but it also shows my father-in-law, who actually gave me my first film camera. He's been to this glacier years ago, and if you see the pictures that he had and versus the pictures that I took, you can see how much of global warming has actually really affected. Because where the glacier started from us today 20 years ago was almost a mile back. And for me, that was just absolutely amazing. But you walk through this place and there's water dripping down on you. It's cold. And we went in the summer. So this was just completely abstract for me. So I definitely had to get a shot of this. Then, of course, my sister-in-law, she invited us to a bonfire on the mountain again. So I decided, okay, well, I'm gonna take, of course, now I'm carrying a camera with me everywhere I go. So I took my film camera, my 6x9, I found the North Star, I pointed it up, and I took exposure for 5 hours. And you can see the star trails, but the thing about it is the moon was out, and so it didn't have that same effect. But for me, it was it was me getting back into astrophotography in some kind of form or fashion. Then I said, okay, I'm gonna try it again. And I tried with the moon, with the film camera. And this is the shot that I got. I was not very happy with it, but I knew I could improve on it. So I kept trying and kept trying. Then I said, okay, now I want to try something like Pleiades, a star cluster. And if you look in the sky, you'll find Pleiades just above the Orion's, the constellation Orion, and it's called sometimes the Seven Sisters, and it's a reflective nebula. And this right, can you all see my cursor if I move it?
Yes.
Great. So this this little bit of blue right here is from the star's gases. Now, the most abundant gas in the universe is hydrogen alpha. So this channel is red. And I said, okay, if I want to take certain images in certain nebulas and certain things that are in the sky, I would need a different camera setup. So that's kind of where I'm at in the process now of saving up again for another camera that's strictly dedicated for astrophotography, because the camera that I have now, the sensor is it's a different type of sensor, and you have filters that you can use with this camera, but this is to come later. But it was fun to hook up my film camera and film lenses. This was shot with a 24 to 70 Canon L series lens with my film camera as well. And this is the shot that really got me back into it. And I said, okay, I'm gonna really try this again. So then I shot Andromeda Galaxy through the telescope. And if you look through with a pair of binoculars or even through a telescope, this is what you see on the screen now is essentially what you'll see when you're looking up. You'll just see like a little hazy blob. So then I pointed it. The next year came around because every season it changes, because these stars, they move, they're not in the sky all the time. So you have certain stars that are that you can see from the northern hemisphere, and you have certain stars that you can see from the southern hemisphere. I live in the northern hemisphere, so during the winter I see this constellation. But there's stars in the southern hemisphere that we don't see, because when they're coming around, it's daytime for us. But this was shot on XR 100, and I like this shot because it really shows the true colors of the nebula. Because if you use film actually shows you the true colors if you use color film. So then I also liked portrait work, and I started doing a lot of this as well. And my favorite film to use, and I started experimenting with film again in different types of film: black and white, color, slide film. And slide film for me, for portraits that I knew would be turned into digital, my go-to became Ektachrome 100, because it was slide film, and it's very clean film, very small grain. But this film I didn't process. The color films, C41 film, I process. Black and white film, I process myself. And at the first time I started digitizing my film, I was using my Canon camera that I still use to this day, and also a macro lens that one of my friends had let me borrow for a few weeks. So I would take a lot of film shots and then try to, on a medium format, it was difficult to stitch them together. So at one point I said, okay, I really want a scanner. So I found a scanner, and I use a scanner now in order to digitize my work. Also, I enjoy taking double exposures as well. Environmental shots, this was a more digital, and then my film shots that I use. This was a recent shot that I did in the studio, and I could play with the backgrounds. I can really focus on trying to make different looks with film, and that's what I've been trying to do, and I really like shooting film because it's a different type of medium than digital. Like I still use my digital camera in order to get my exposures and to say, okay, this is kind of about how I want it. But I live in Switzerland, so again, every once in a while, I still go out at nighttime and I'll take my camera, my film cameras, and I'll do night photography. And this is a pretty popular place in Zurich. This is central, and then, as I said again, with experimenting with film, everybody knows Cinestill 800. If you shoot film, it's almost the most expensive film that they have on the market, but you can use it with tungsten light. So I would go around and look for certain lights that I knew would react to this film, and I would shoot that. And then every time I went on vacation, I would always have my camera or two on me, and so my wife is from Sardinia as well. It's a very beautiful island, but I always saw a pattern within my work. It was always a star or a moon or a sun or something that was astronomical within my work, and that's what kind of got me back going into astrophotography once again. So the more I start shooting, the more I started to fall in love with astrophotography again. And this shot was done on Acros 100. And if you look in the middle, this is actually Orion's, the constellation Orion. And in the middle down is Orion's nebula, the one picture, the M42 that I've fallen in love with. That's my go-to target for my camera setup nowadays. But it's also another nebula just in the corner of the third star that's going down. And that I was really surprised to see show up on black and white film. It's very small because I used the 50mm lens. And this picture has been, I think this picture was used for promotion. And this picture is when I had all of my ducks in a row, and I was able to go up to a dark site and satellite and set my telescope up and take longer exposures. And I was able to use longer exposures this time because one, I wasn't using my laptop anymore. I had a small computer that's dedicated for astronomy, and this computer is, you can use this computer. It's very small, and once you set your telescope up, it takes a picture. You say, okay, go to this place here. It takes a picture of it, and then it analyzes the area of sky that it's pointing in, and what you've chosen to be that you want to see, and then it'll make slight adjustments and moves to get to that exact point in the middle. And then once it does that, they say, okay, you're aligned. And now I can use my guide camera, and the guide camera, that job, it takes about 10 different stars, and it analyzes how the stars are moving, and those makes minor adjustments to the telescope. So you can take longer photos. And this was the key part that I was missing in my work. And what I liked about it the most was I could use my tablet, I could use my iPhone in order to connect to it and control it. In fact, I have it just back here, and if I have my iPad here, and if I tell it to go to a certain place, like right now, I'm going to tell it to go home, and then you'll see it start moving in the back. And I also have an electronic focuser. So now when I don't have to touch the camera and introduce camera shake in order to get focus, now it'll go automatically.
Hi, Clinton. Hi. We just want to make sure we don't we leave enough time for Yay, and I mean, and then
yes.
at the end, if we could talk more about the camera and the tech and everything, if we have time at the end. But we just want to make sure. Thank you very much. That was amazing.
No problems. Yeah. So this was the last slide in the last show.
Oh, great. Perfect. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you all for listening.
Yeah, wow.
You see me sweating there?
That was really amazing, Clinton. I'm
Thank
blown
you.
away. Yeah. Whoa.
It's very, how do I follow the universe?
How do you follow the universe?
You could stop sharing, Clinton. Thanks.
Oh, sorry. There we go.
You have to show your screen.
Yep. Thank you for reminding me. All right. Now we have to switch gears a little bit here. I'm going to share the screen here. There we go. All right.
All
Okay.
right. You ready for me?
Yeah.
All right. So in the beginning, I feel like I need to start there. So when you're asked to do one of these things, these talks, you begin to kind of go through the history of where you've started as an artist, and try to pick out what you feel is the best of your photography. And as I was beginning to do that, I noticed how I had changed in my influences. So instead of just showing you what I think is the best of my photography, I've decided to kind of just meander through the influences that where I started and the influences and how they changed my photography. So in the beginning, I was kind of project-based, shooting a lot of fire hydrants because I was doing a project for some people who wanted to do something interesting. And I felt like for some reason, fire hydrants were an interesting subject. It was something that we pass by every day, at least in the States. And we don't kind of give any credence to. It's just an ordinary object. And how do we make ordinary objects beautiful or seen in an artistic way? So as I was just thinking about how I would take photographs differently from a lot of other people than a lot of other photographers, not doing landscape photography or portraiture because I'm not comfortable shooting people. That takes a different type of eye. I think Habib has an amazing eye for, and actually Heather does too, because that's some of the stuff that you guys do. But that's not where I was. You can do the next one, Michael. So as I was looking for inspiration, I started here. And I found a photographer named Eric Kim, who actually had a to-do list of 100 things that you would do as a photographer. And one of the things that he said was to prime lens, something that can teach a photographer how to be a better photographer by using your prime lens. Ditch your neck strap as a photographer. Don't have your neck strap because you're gonna be doing some weird stuff trying to shoot. Always shooting raw as a photographer. It gives you the most data. Alcohol and photography don't mix. I guess stuff like that. Make your own list. Stuff like that. I didn't use everything that he said, but I one of the things that struck me was the rule of thirds, that he said that the rule of thirds works 99% of the time. And that basically is saying, don't center your subject like I have here. It's a little bit more interesting if the subject is kind of in a third of your picture. So next, Michael. And so as I began to move through what I was, the photographer I am today, I was still trying to find, how do I make ordinary objects different, or different view, something that you guys or anybody doesn't see naturally. And there's a place in Trenton, that's the Delaware Raritan Canal, and it's sort of daylit. And so unbeknownst to me, some of my first kind of reflection pieces were in the Delaware Raritan Canal. Next one. And I noticed that color was always something that, except for in that last piece, was something that always attracted me. And so I began to shoot oversaturated, very saturated. I was always, as a young kid, just fascinated by Technicolor movies, you know, and they were over bright. They were, because you're basically coloring film to a certain degree. That's an oversimplification of Technicolor movies, but that's kind of where I sat. Next one. But I always kept coming back to these reflections and the color that they would bring out. And I also noticed that I was being influenced by, not by photographers, but by painters. Next one. The brightness of certain photographers in the colors that they used, the shading that they used. There's a photographer named, you can do the next one now, Turner, Burning Houses of Parliament. I went to the Philadelphia Art Museum, and this just struck me. It just lit up the room. And as a photographer, how do you emulate a painter? Next slide. And I began to find that I could do that in movement, in reflections in pools, and reflections in buildings. So I started moving slowly towards being more abstract, because I was looking for those type of that type of movement that painters can do with the stroke of a brush. But I was using my camera. And next one, there's another. Again, you see the color. I'm always attracted to color. I always want it. This is just reflections in the high line, just buildings reflecting off of buildings, and just finding the right light. Is it that light on an overcast day? You know, the brightness that you get, the sharpness, the darkness that creates this color that you can capture. And of course, if your camera's wide open, set wide open, you capture these colors. You can do the next one. And I also am influenced by a painter called Maurice Prendergast. And as I went to the Barnes in Philadelphia, Barnes Museum, I noticed I kept picking out his stuff. I was always attracted to stuff, not knowing who he was. Every time I visited, I would see his stuff. His stuff was loose and had movement and depth, and there's almost a fluffiness to the way he painted. Next one. And so as I began to learn my camera, I use a Sony, I began to try to emulate that fluffiness, that style, the painterly style. A lot of people would say my work is painterly. And I just was always trying to capture that as I learned in the settings of my camera, as opposed to doing something after, as opposed to working in Photoshop or something like that. I was really just trying to use every single piece of my camera. I'm still learning it. Next one, Michael. And as I learn, that painterly style becomes, I capture it every once in a while. A lot of this has to do with just the light, and not even what the camera is doing and what the settings that you set up for, but how you capture the light at the time that you think your settings are perfect. You do the next one. Again, still capturing that painterly feel is something I'm always going after, but it's always a trick of the light as well. It's just the cameras too. Next one. And when I find color and that painterly style, I am in heaven. To capture this is in Niagara Falls, looking down from the platform on the American side. I think I stood there for a long time. I only took this in one shot, but I just couldn't believe that I had probably gotten that shot at the time. You can do the next one. And so as I kind of search for that abstract shot, I noticed that what I'm really capturing in a lot of cases is a surreal shot. And so surrealism kind of sneaks in when you're looking for that abstract shot. And one thing I kind of hate when I'm applying for shows is some shows will say artists and photographers can apply. Well, photographers are artists. And I think it's around that point that I decided that instead of calling myself a photographer, when people ask me, what am I? I'm a contemporary artist. My brush is my camera. And what you're seeing is what I try. What I'm trying to capture is what I see. And I see the world very colorful. I see the world very surreal. And as photographers, that's what we do. You think it's not the easiest thing to do, to capture the vision that's in your head. And I think that's what makes you an artist. Eric Kim, he also had said that photography isn't just about taking a photograph. It's more than that. It's also a feeling. So to have people come to my photography and grab that feeling that you've captured, when they know by looking at your photograph that it's your photograph, that it's Habib that shot that, or it's a Heather has shot that, or I have shot that, that means that we are artists because you can recognize our style in film. That is a trait of an artist. You know, the day that somebody came and said, hey, that's something that Craig shot, I knew I was an artist. And so that's what I am, a contemporary artist that happens to use a camera as my brush. You can do the next one. And so I'm always trying to capture that surreal shot, something that people look at, but it's nature that I'm using. This picture was just a reflection again in a pool, trying to capture something abstract, but became surreal. And then I noticed that the wind or breeze would mess up that perfect shot of the reflection that we're all trying to get, really the perfect shot that's just a mirror image. But to capture like the spider webbing effect and just to sit there for a long time and capture that the right moment, that's an art. There's an art to just looking down and noticing the small things that you pass by every day. You know, a lot of people, you can do that every once in a while, but you have to do it consistently all the time. You're an artist. And so, next one, Michael. I began to work a little bit bigger, capturing, the High Line is an amazing canvas because the light bounces off of buildings. The High Line is in New York City. It's just a recovered raised train platform. It's a park now, and you can go between the buildings, and in certain spots, if you sit and wait, and sometimes even by accident, you can capture these colors, this surrealness, this abstractness. And it's just one of the most beautiful things you can see, the world capturing something that man made and turning it into a piece of art. And if you look right, the right time, you can capture it in so many different ways. So this is a more recent piece called 507. That was obvious to name it that. But I'm always attracted to that type of manipulation. And this was actually interesting because I had taken this picture a few years ago and I called it, it was like Reflectionism 3. It wasn't very, original with my names, but it was probably one of the third reflectionism pieces I've taken. And it was the High Line hadn't been developed as much as it's been developed. And I took it on a overcast, rainy day. And so it gave a different type of sheen. And I started knowing that rain, wind, the way the sun shone, just obvious things that change the color and change the brightness without you having to mess with your camera. You're just messing with making sure that the light hits things in the right, in an interesting way. You can move on. And so another piece in New York in the Jacob Javits Center, it's kind of a reflection shot. You can see the reflection of some of the clouds and the reflection of all the scaffolding that was in the Jacob Javits Center. It's just kind of the perfect storm for me. It's a beautiful setting. It's got some color. It's got some reflection, and it's got all this other stuff that's intermingling with it that causes this. I love line work, and so I love photographing bridges, and this kind of just is a culmination of all that work. And just seeing this was during Comic-Con, so I'm trying to take this as thousands of people are rushing into Comic-Con and trying to get this picture at the same time, looking up and going, oh my God, this is what I want to take. And so I had very few seconds to get my camera out, look up, take it, and it turned out to be perfect. You can do the next one. And so what I've also learned, the simplest thing is when you're doing your abstract work and messing with the camera, also the perspective is something I'm using. So if we were to turn this into landscape, landscape, you would notice that it's just a reflection of a fall day in water by a theater, but as I continue to search for that abstract feeling of the photography for myself, I start changing the way that we see it and messing with our heads a little bit. So this is just flipped on its head, and it's called sonogram, sonogram. And it's one of the pieces I feel like is the perfect reflection piece and abstract piece. Next one. And again, learning how to use different topography in slate with water, just looking down sometimes outside my house, or you learn to use.
This one's so cool.
Yeah, it's doesn't get very big, but it's really the subject is there's a tree and there's a house, the reflection from the house. That's what this is really. And just the way that the sidewalk has been fragmented or scored has created some of the abstractness of it. You can do the next one. And another way that I've learned and grown as a photographer is by doing collaborations with other artists. This is a piece I did of the Delaware Raritan Canal daylit part. There's still some lattice in it, and I worked with an artist named Jane Zamos who does some amazing work. Her work with color is amazing. So what we did is we took my piece of my photograph, printed it on glass, and then she collaged and painted on it. And what I like to do with glass, instead of using a digital process, I like to try to manufacture my abstracts. So in this case, we applied different layers and printed on see-through glass as opposed to a glass that had a base white coat down on it. And so we could do all this stuff from the back of it by painting and collaging. Do the next one. And a piece that I collaborated with Heather, combining her pinhole camera and my digital photography, and a building that every photographer and professional and amateur, there's this amazing glass building, the new tax building in Trenton, that just reflects light so amazingly. And I don't know how long we had the camera up the first time, a couple of months.
Yeah.
And then what Heather and I did is just kind of took some of my photography and the images that I want to say that it would have been something exciting, like we snuck in one night and stuck our cameras up, but we actually got permission and to do this, to surround the tax building with cameras, pinhole cameras, and we got some amazing images, and we're just able to combine our works. And so I learn a lot from the processes that other artists do. You learn a couple things. Can you work with that artist? And what is it that they teach you by doing these collaborations? You know, I was amazed at the color palette that we were able to get from combining our stuff, because to get to separately, it looks, neither of our pictures look anything like this, but to bring it together the way we did, it just, I was amazingly, I was stunned by what we created. Next one. But at the end of the day, what I always come back to is color and ordinary objects and how beautiful they are when we kind of just take the time to stop and look. And I was taking a motorcycle trip with a friend of mine from New Jersey to Toronto, and we got to the Finger Lakes and stopped in this park because the water was just this amazing blue. And I saw this lone picnic bench at the end of a pier, and had to take this picture. It was just beautiful. We just hit everything right. The fog had just lifted, so there's still a little bit of a haze, but the blues, which I seem to always be attracted to, against this picnic bench that is slowly disintegrating in a way, just kind of epitomizes kind of the work that I always come back to. The next one, Michael. And again, manipulating my camera and light. I kept passing this lone cart, Target shopping cart in the middle of nowhere. And to my surprise, when I came back with my camera, because I don't always carry my camera, I'm not there. That's on the guy's list too, but I'm like, I can't carry my camera every place. Just it's just too much. What I usually do is scope out a situation that I want to take and wait till the day that I feel like all the light is right or the way I want to capture it, and I'll go back. But this is something I had to go back to immediately. And it's to me, one of the most breathtaking pictures I've taken. It's just this lonely cart in the middle of what looks like a forest or a path or a hiking trail. And the reds just worked out perfectly. It doesn't always work out this way. Sometimes you get the reds will get blotchy because it's just all about catching the light the right way to make sure that the red shows up based on some of the settings that you put in your camera. You do the next one, Michael. Again, messing with partial color and black and white. This was on that motorcycle trip through to Niagara on the Canadian side, and there are just so many bridges. Way down is the falls, but I'm always fascinated with bridges and the greenery. Again, that play between nature and man that I kind of like to also photograph. This just again epitomizes that thing that my eye is drawn to. Next one. And it always comes back to color for me. This was taken in Atlanta. I just got in the car one day and said, "Hey, hon, my wife, I said to her, I'll be back." And I drove to Atlanta. And she had suggested, "Hey, there's some places that in Atlanta you might want to photograph." And this is on Krog Street, I think. There's a bunch of graffiti down there. And I took a lot of pictures to try to get this picture right. It's almost neon. It was just, the place is lit in the right way. And this figure was coming toward me at the end of the hall. It just was the perfect picture. I had the settings right after taking 10 of these pictures. And the figure just happened to be coming at the same time. And it was just perfect timing. The next one, which I think is the last one. I hate taking pictures of Ferris wheels. Everybody takes pictures of Ferris wheels. But when I was in Atlanta, I took 80,000 pictures of Ferris wheels because the sky view is in the middle of the city. It just doesn't make any sense where it is to me. It's on the edge of a park. It just, like by a traffic light, it just doesn't make any sense. But the picture is, because if you see all the lines coming in, I just was fascinated by the grids and the patterns that the lines had created, and of course the drama of the sky behind this Ferris wheel. It's just it's almost cartoonish in a way, but it also kind of mimics pentagrass in the way it's fluffy as well. So that is it for me.
Nice job, Craig.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Greg, for that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Just,
Thank you.
I know you personally, and just to hear you talk about it all the time, I just sit back and I close my eyes. I'm like, damn, man, this guy has it down pat. And definitely when it comes down to mimicking, like somewhat, like in a sense, not mimicking, but in a sense of a picture, like an oil canvas or just real paintings, you hit it on the head, man.
Thank you.
So for everyone that's at home and even in person, we realized that we did run a little bit late today. We started a little bit late too. So if you have to go, no worries at all, but I think we will continue with our Q&A as normal.
Yep.
So we're just gonna go over a little bit of time tonight. So if you have to go, totally understand. Thank you so much for coming. And then Michael, if you want to take care of the Q&A, I don't know if we have any questions in the chat box.
There were so many great comments, but
Tons of great comments for both
I don't know about,
artists.
somebody did ask why Switzerland?
Oh yeah, I saw that from David.
Yeah,
Why not? Good question.
That's a great answer. Why not? Go ahead, Clinton. Oh, you're muted. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, leaving from Hawaii to go to a land. I surfed as well. I'm a surfer as well. So leaving from Hawaii to go to Switzerland, a landlocked place, it was a bit difficult for me. But my wife is from Switzerland, and she grew up here. So it's for us with the family. It was just a move that she wanted to feel more comfortable at home. And I said, yeah, sure, why not? I mean, but the whole time I'm thinking that, she's speaking Italian with her mother all the time. And I said, okay, well, you're from Sardinia, and it's an island. Yeah, no problem. Just one island to the next. And she was like, no, Switzerland. And I was like, you mean a place that ain't got no water? But yeah, I mean, I've been here for 7 years now, and I love it. It's a great place to raise kids. Safe, clean. Yeah, I have no complaints. Boring, but I'm a father of 2, so I don't need any more excitement than that.
Nice. Yeah, you can all see the great comments, so there's no
Question all the way at the
reason.
bottom just came
Yeah.
in for
Keep
Craig.
going.
Fresh question just came in.
Oh, let's see. Is that for Craig? How are you achieving the oversaturation Lightroom software camera settings?
In Sony, there's actually 2 settings, and if you dig deep in the menus, and this, I got a manual about this thick on my camera, and I'm still not through it. But there's a setting in it called Vivid, that's in one of the main menus. But there's also a setting called it's color brightness, something like that, in the secondary menu, which I never knew. This is my second Sony. I started with a A300, something very simple, and I've graduated to an A77. And there's secondary menus that you can get to. So my suggestion is really get the manual, get off of automatic, go to manual and get a manual, and you and you just find layers upon layers of just different settings. It's ridiculous how many settings are in the cameras, and if you don't get off manual, you'll never find that. And so I just primarily use those 2 settings as my main settings. More so the secondary menu now, because it actually also gives me access to that painterly quality that I get. But it's also, light has to be right even in those settings. I mean, because the more light you get in, the more saturation, obviously, that comes in with.
We have a question in person.
Yay, question from the audience in person.
Oh, question. When you're shooting these pictures, that is what you're seeing.
Well, yeah, from the screen, it's hard to see it all the way. You just got to trust.
Color, saturation.
That's what I see in my head. You know, I'm thinking that all those colors that I see, if I can just get them brighter.
See, that's my question. When I take a photo, how do I photograph what I am seeing?
You almost got to extrapolate what you want those colors to be. I mean, you know what they're basically going to be. And once you get to, no screen that small is going to show you exactly what you want, you know, unfortunately. But once you figure out going into these levels, because my guess is that you're not going to vivid, or you're not going to, it's not color. I forget the name of the thing. I'll tell you later on. But there's those two settings that just really just overexpose. I guess they're just setting everything to overexposed and saturate. So I'm only basically using those two settings and then kind of blowing up the, you know, the F and the, you know,
I think
it's to the edge of where I could do it, you know?
I think the Sony has picture profiles.
It does have picture profiles
Yeah.
too, but there's even another,
Huh.
but you're almost less setting that. And then they're really, it's almost like they're two different cameras. in what
Yeah,
they
I
do,
know there's
because
like a vivid
the
on and
vivid-
off, and yeah.
you can shoot in RAW and JPEG, but the other menu is only a JPEG setting.
But
And-
you don't do that in the development. It's like I will see
I do-
something and I'll see the color and I'll be like, oh, that's so beautiful. But then you,
I try to do that all in camera. And seriously, if whatever camera you're using, get the better. There's a guy that does, he'll take cameras and then he just does everything to them and then just writes a thick manual. You know, we're used to having that really, I don't know the name, but again, I'll find out for you. And he just does, it's literally a novel on my camera, on all cameras. I think he does them all. His Hartman, I don't know. Anyway, and he really just really digests everything. And that's where I found and read about all those other manuals that give me those settings.
Yeah.
I'm gonna quote you on that, Craig. Get on manual and get a manual.
Yes, get on manual and get a manual.
It's very true.
And
though.
literally it is novel size. I'm not all the way through it. I basically, what I do is chapter by chapter, and then I learn it and I do it and I do it and do it. And then I go to the next chapter. And I mean, I'm not talking weeks, it's months sometimes.
It's good you're dedicated to your practice.
Yeah, and that's actually also how my stuff has changed. It's just, oh, I've gone to the next chapter. And I just learn it to death, you know? And I'm also only using a prime lens. I don't use any other lens. I have a telephoto, but my prime Carl Zeiss lens is all I use. So I've gotten just really good at knowing how the light hits my lens and what those settings do. I just have mastered that until I go into the next thing. Eventually, someday I'll get another lens, but my Carl Zeiss wide angle, it makes me do stuff also that I wouldn't normally do. Like with the telephoto, I have to go up close or I have to go underneath. It makes you kind of take pictures in a different perspective as well. So you learn it if you do that. Just become a master of what it is.
And then Juho asks, for Clinton, on average, how long does it take one space photo?
You're on,
Gotta
you're on
get off of mute,
Clinton.
Clint.
There you go.
Hey. So, June, thanks for the question. It depends on how happy you are as an artist with that photo. You can take a photo for 2 minutes, 30 seconds, but if you want more and more and more detail, the photo has to be longer. The photo that I showed at the end was by astrophotography, since it was not long. It was 1 hour and 46 minutes. And that was using exposure times of 2 minutes each. But the goal is, like my projects that I have coming up, I want to be 12, 13, 14 hours worth on one image. This is why sometimes I'm able to shoot a target in one season and come back to it the next year and add data to that same target.
Oh.
So it depends on when you say you're happy with it. Some people are happy with me. When I first started, I was happy with the first 6 seconds.
So Clinton, you're not doing things in one sitting then, you're doing things over the course of a couple sittings.
Yeah, on the course of a season. So if say during the winter, if my famous target M42 comes up, during the winter, the weather is harsh, it's elements, frozen lens caps, you have you have everything that's really that can work against you, the weather and so on. So what you want to do is you want to try to maximize that time. And so maybe out of a season, I only get 8 hours. I only get 8 hours. And out of that 8 hours, I'm sorry, about 8 hours. And out of that 8 hours, I'm only able to use 3 hours of that. And there's also other things. You have to make a dark library. And for every time, however long you take a photo, you also have to close your lens, throw a blanket over it so no light hits it. And that reduces the noise out of your images. Then sometimes you have to take flats, and flats is when you get little dust motes off of the sensor or within the optical train. So you have to take those as well. So it can be quite a long process, but it's really up to you as the artist of where you want your photo to end. Because the last photo I took, I finally was able to get up to a dark site, and that's been my goal for 3 years almost, to get to a dark site. Get myself to a dark site, get the equipment, and I built a battery that would last for 12 hours, so I could image about at least 12 nights, at least 2 nights in a row. And that battery, before I was only able to get during the winter 1 hour, because the battery, the colder it is, especially here in Switzerland, when it's negative like 5-6 degrees, the battery eats up a lot faster. So I recently I built a battery, and now I'm able to image longer and stay out with my equipment longer. But now I've also run into the problem of I have to switch the battery, so therefore I have to touch the machine again. So it's a lot that goes into it. And you also have filters, and filters, they block out a lot of, they have moon filters that block out the moon or the city light pollution. They really don't block out city light pollution. What they do is they enhance the contrast of the darkness in the sky. And so you have like hydrogen alpha filters, you have oxygen filters, you have sulfur filters, and all of these give a different color of light. And you also have to readjust your focus for each of these filters.
We actually have to wrap it up. One of the great things about being in person is, of course, being in person, but one of the other things about it is we have a time limit because we have to let security go home and close up the building. But thank you all so much. I'll let Heather Habib, I'll let you close it out.
Hey guys, every month it gets better. I learned so much from the photographers that we have every month. Our anniversary. This is amazing. It's a 2-year anniversary.
That's right.
We want to thank all of our loyal viewers, all of our new viewers, all the guests that we've had. CA, I want to thank you for coming in person. Clint, I know if you were a little closer, if you're in the States, you'll probably be here also. I want to thank you, man. I reached out to you at the drop of a dime. You're down for it. So I want to thank you also, all of the guests that came here tonight. Thank you.
Yes,
Give yourself a round of applause. One last thing, guys, real quick, if you can, tell the people where they could find you at on Instagram, any new projects that you have coming up that you want people to look out for. Just real quick, can you throw it out there?
Go ahead, Clinton.
Yeah, sure. You can find me at Kemetic Media. It's KEMETIC_media, MEDIA on Instagram. And from there, you can find my website. And I do have some special projects coming on. I've just been in the dark room for about 8 hours today. So I've been breathing chemicals today. So yeah, that's
And it's like
that's
2
pretty
o'clock
much
over there right now, right? Like 3 a.m.
It's 15 minutes to 10 to 2.
All right, man. You get some rest. Craig, anything?
You can find me at Shofed Art on Instagram, and my website is there. And I am working towards exhibit at Princeton Arts Council. That's the biggest thing I've got coming in the next year.
Awesome.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah,
Let's
thank
go.
you so much,
All
everyone.
right, guys. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, our next one's March 17th. So we
Stay
will
tuned.
see you then. Yeah.
March 17th, y'all.
Same time.
Bye.